today's board meeting, I have the privilege of interviewing a business partner, a friend, a coach, an inspiration, Miss Coach Coral Owen. There's Miss Coral, ready for a board meeting.
Number one.
Number one. Whoop, whoop.
Doing the thing.
Coach Coral is one of the co-founders of Team Babe Athletics, and they lead an inspiring group of ladies as a triathlon team. Coral's a swim coach. She's a race organizer. She has an amazing job where she helps military families and have healthy lives and their mindsets. She's connected to nature and knows its health and wellness things. I basically couldn't be more like-minded or have more respect for anybody than I could than Miss Coral Owen. So I'm excited for you guys to get to know her as we explore Bel Air. So the Bel Air Causeway is one of my favorite little drop-in spots because, boom, you're there. You're already there. And what's cool is, depending on the conditions and the traffic, do you want to go kind of back down towards Clearwater? You can go back into this lovely little neighborhood back in there too. So I'll do that sometimes if the conditions are crappy. Or as Coral and I are going to do, we're going to go back over my shoulder. There's another little bridge to go underneath, and there's some mangrove islands, and there's a little island that we're going to go have our little conversation on. Well, here's Miss Coral and her beautiful prone paddleboard. So Miss Coral, can you please introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you, what do you do, and why this prone paddleboard thing?
Hey, I'm Coral Owen. Some people call me Coach Coral. I'm a triathlon coach, live in the Tampa Bay area. Freaking love to paddle, be on the water, do a lot of open water swimming, and just all the awesomeness outside.
All the things.
All the things.
And so this prone paddling is basically like a mix between kind of like a freestyle swimming stroke, but then you can mix it up and you can use both arms as well too. So tell us a little bit about the prone technique.
Yeah, so prone is actually one of the oldest water sports. Kind of originates from the Polynesian Islands. They would use old wood boards to, well, I guess they weren't old back then, but they would use wooden boards to paddle back and forth between the islands, kind of in a prone position, laying down, paddling as you would like a freestyle.
Yeah, when there was no surf, you know, you could go get your workout in, kind of.
Totally. And so modern day paddle boards are a little bit more forgiving on your knees. So a lot of history there with the surf lifesaving. This is more of an endurance sport, so you can paddle longer distances, either prone on your belly, but you've also got knee wells in a lot of the newer boards that allow you to go on your knees and do a double arm paddle as well.
There's nothing more humbling than you're like in this big long. I remember I was paddling around Key West in a Key West Classic, and I got passed up by a woman on a prone paddleboard, and I just couldn't believe that this woman, just using her arms, was not only keeping up with me, but she was passing me. So it is a super cool sport, and we'll find out a little bit more in some of Coral's ambitious goals about Chattajack and swimming around Key West this weekend and all sorts of fun stuff. So we'll get to know Coral, but first we gotta paddle. We gotta get in flow first. Bye. So somebody asked me where pelicans live. This is where pelicans live. See all that white stuff in those trees? Yeah, this is where they live. It smells fantastic. All right, so Coral and I have paddled to this little island in the middle of, I don't even know what you call this, the Intercoastal Waterway?
Sure.
Intercoastal Waterway, Bel Air, Clearwater, Sand Key, that whole area. If you ever come over from, basically from Pinellas or from Tampa, you would come over the Bel Air Bridge, which is East Bay, West Bay, all that kind of stuff right off of 19. Good, easy paddle. And then Coral, as we talked about in your introduction, you talked a little bit about being a triathlete coach. So tell us a little bit about Team Babe and what kind of stuff that your community and your team is up to.
Sweet. So I started coaching triathlon after being a triathlete for quite a long while, and going in the collegiate triathlon club space. When I left that environment, I really felt like there was that piece missing of community and that bond, that sisterhood. A lot of my best friends came from my collegiate triathlon days, and so after I took a little sabbatical and got back into coaching, I really just had this vision of creating a really rad, all abilities, all backgrounds women's triathlon team. And about 2 years ago, one of the athletes I was working with at the time was like, "Hey, I have this idea called Team Babe." And Babe stands for Be a Badass Every Day.
Be a badass every day. I couldn't love that more. I'm a babe.
You are a babe.
I'm totally
yeah,
a babe.
anybody can be a babe.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just, we've got probably over 100 members all around the world, and some are local to Tampa Bay, others are as far out there as Taiwan, but all distances, all abilities, all paces, and everybody's having a great time.
And what's cool, I said a little bit I've seen, it really is like this very encouraging community of people from all different backgrounds. People participating in races around the world, which is cool. Like, oh, this person's swimming across this body of water. This person's completed an Ironman this weekend. Like, it really is crazy just to hear these inspirational stories.
But even down to as foundational as, hey, this person swam their first quarter mile without stopping today.
Yeah.
And so then, and you've got everything in between, but everything is celebrated equally.
Exactly.
And supported equally, and it's really kind of taken a life of its own on, and I just couldn't be more amazed at kind of where we're at just in year 3.
It really is a special, cool community, and that's the thing for me as being an athletic dude who's a trainer, and I've never really been a meathead, but the idea of endurance sports, like, okay, let's go in a straight line for a really long period of time. I've done Chicago Marathon. I've run about 10 half marathons. I've got some pretty decent scores for a 200-pound plus guy, but I was always kind of scared of like the swimming component of it as much as I liked it. So do you have any advice for somebody who wanted to get started in swimming or triathlon, or speaking to that person wanting to join the team?
Totally. I think, when it comes to being what I call an adult onset swimmer, there's a lot more of the head game goes on than we give it credit for. So, swimming is really the sport that I've found that you can't work harder to get better necessarily. You kind of have to surrender to the water and
100%.
really relax, go with the flow, and work on becoming more efficient and calmer before you can go fast, go far. And that's I think the biggest disconnect, where a lot of people come from strength-based sports or typical endurance sports, that there's this like positive correlation of work harder, go faster.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the opposite, go slow to go fast with swimming. But really finding a mentor, finding a coach, finding an experienced swimmer that can watch you swim so that you're not beating your head against the wall 24/7, and you have that easier time going about your ramp into swimming. And then finding a community is really key, especially if you're doing the open water stuff, just from a support standpoint, safety standpoint, making sure you're doing all the good things.
Well, as I say, there's a lot of things I could talk about what you just did right there, but from the community standpoint, like, there is that group flow component, meaning when you see somebody else that do something, you're like, well, maybe I could do that, right? It really, really helps. Like, it's amazing to see that happen. And honestly, the big thing you said about getting a coach and being a part of the community is, like, look at you and I. You and I are coaches who are humble enough to say, hey, swimming scares me. I could use a little encouragement and guidance here. Coral, can you help me out? And for you to say, Garrett, I know some strength training stuff. I know some functional training stuff, but you're really good at what you do. Can you help me out?
100%.
Like, everybody needs a coach, right?
Even coaches need coaches.
And honestly, I just want to say, like, you do inspire me. Like, the way that you live your life and the way that you do participate in this community, and like a lot of the things that I want to do are doing them the way that you do them. So you really are that inspiration and positive influence to so many people. So thank you for being that for me as well too.
Thank you.
You really are. Like, so Coral, like a couple weeks ago, she's been trying to get me to come swimming for
At least
a year and a half. Oh, I'm coming. I'm coming this week. Erica said I could go. It's gonna happen. I'm like, oh, I can't. I got something going on. But you know, that's kind of what happens, right? Is we get in our way, we make our excuses why we don't do the things that we really want to do, or that's something that is going to push us out of that comfort zone. So to A, have that environment in the community that's really big, but to have somebody continually kind of invite you until you get there. And what's been cool is, you know, I went from never open water swimming to doing a mile open water swim race in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks, which is pretty cool. But I'm a badass every day.
You are a badass every day, but the thing that I think is so cool is, and we were talking about this last week when you came and swam, was how this kind of breath adventure, journey, endeavor, exploration that you've been on, because you had been in the water
since I left Harbor Island, like over a year, and I was a better swimmer. I was a better swimmer not being in the water for a year and a half because I understood breath work and I was able to calm myself.
And that's why I'm so excited to be able to pick your brain and hear more about, learn with you about this breath component and really unpack it in a structured way so that, you know, we can help swimmers connect. And I think all athletes can benefit from breath work, even just the toe in the water dip that I've done.
Yeah.
Because there's such that, you know, brain-body connection with the breath to relax the physical side of things so that you can kind of surrender, like we were talking about, and just be fluid and let your body do what it does.
So we talk a lot about breathing the way that you want to feel, right?
Yeah.
Or that your breath is a remote control to your nervous system. So even in the race the other day, I had all the gamut of emotions. I did my normal, like, you know, pre-competition routine's fine. Like, I do it every time I work out. I can do all my visualization, I do all this stuff. I felt great getting into the water. And what was funny is, within that first, like, 5 minutes, before I think I even got to the first buoy, like, I was panicking. I was in, you know, my heart rate's high. I've never been kicked in the hand or kicked somebody in the hand or a face or any of that. It was just, looking at my heart rate afterwards, my heart rate was, like, sky high, like, immediately. So what I did is I kind of just chilled myself out. I allowed myself to just calm down. I did a couple of down regulation breaths that really did help me kind of slow down and get into it. But for an experienced swimmer, for them to be able to do the visualization standpoint, if they are going to compete in further stuff, but also that you can work smarter without working harder.
Exactly.
Is one of the big things. So if I've never told you this too, but I did the Wim Hof every day for a month. I lowered my resting heart rate 11 points. I went from like a 60 resting heart rate, which is pretty healthy, to a 49. And all I did was 3 rounds of the Wim Hof breath and worked on my breath holds. And I went from only being able to hold my breath for about 40 seconds to being about 3 minutes and 40 seconds over that month.
So what denotes a Wim Hof type breathing?
Good question. So the Wim Hof is a super ventilation, or what I call an upregulation breath. And you know, a lot of people have heard Wim Hof. He's the crazy Dutchman who does all the cold exposure stuff. But it's the hyperventilation. It's so what you do is when you do that, it changes the alkalinity of your body. And so when your body is a little more alkaline, it actually can kind of feel a little bit better. It gets you up, so to speak. So it is an energy producing breath, back to breathing the way that you want to feel. So if you need to perform, it will help you do that. But then on the backside of that holding the breath, because you've got your body more alkaline, you can buffer the cardiovascular system and how you kind of respond to carbon dioxide better. So imagine as an athlete, if carbon dioxide doesn't bother you and your cells can uptake more oxygen, that means you can go longer with less fatigue. Right? So the whole thing, without going into a whole scientific lesson, like all sides of it really. But that's one of the things that I'd really like people to feel. And once they feel that, they begin to understand how breath work can actually help them. All right, so yes, it is super awesome. So let's talk about you and some of your goals a little bit. Going back to like Coral just being inspiring and one of these leaders who kind of walks the walk a little bit. So this weekend, you're what? Oh yeah, I'm gonna go swim around Key West.
Relay.
It's a relay, so I get it. I don't care. The world that I live in, I'm around some pretty awesome people. I don't randomly hear people just go, yeah, I'm gonna go participate in swim around Key West in a relay.
But see, this comes back to the community thing, right? You surround yourself with people that, you know, buoy your goals, but also kind of push you out of your comfort zone to do some neat stuff. So one of my best girlfriends, her name is Britt, she, after we did Collegiate Triathlon together, she popped down to the Keys, and this is a swim that they apparently do every year, and somehow I've never quite made my way down there. So this is the year, Mermaid Mafia. I'm gonna go do a little 12-mile relay swim.
That's amazing.
It's gonna be a blast.
And then here's something else that you and I talked about the other day that I really liked, was the idea of, so like, why aren't you doing triathlon right now?
Yeah, that's actually, it's kind of an interesting space to be in, right? Being a triathlon coach, and I haven't really focused on trying a couple years. And I think it's really, it was a couple of things kind of coming to a head last year. I was training, I had the intention to get back to long course triathlon, do Ironman Florida, which would have been my second goal. And COVID hit, and it was just one of those things that the grind didn't really have I just didn't feel drawn to it. And for me, most importantly, I didn't really feel that spark of joy. It was just, I would wake up and go, oh man, bike ride. And I felt more drawn to get back into the paddling, the water. It's really my roots. And it's just something that has brought me immense peace and joy in the last year, and really tapped me into this awesome paddling community that I have around here. So
very much so. And I was gonna say, so she wants to get her fingers back into the water, and you know, a couple weeks ago, Coral's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go swim the length of the Pinellas County coastline, or dang near it, or you know, whatever happens on that day based on the conditions is gonna happen. But this is just another example of why you're a badass every day, is just setting those goals like that is really, really cool. So tell me about, what was your like inspiration on that paddle specifically?
So that's actually a really great question. I love maps, and so I'm kind of actually backing up. When I pivoted from Ironman Florida last year to, hey, paddling is really the space I want to be in. I found out about this crazy Chattajack race, which is a 32-mile paddle down the Tennessee River, and signed up for that. Chattajack looked like it was going to get canceled, and did. Yeah. So I was looking at the map, and I was like, oh, Pinellas County coastline's 32 miles. What do you know?
Isn't that convenient?
What a coincidence.
Isn't that convenient?
So, yeah, it didn't end up being 32 miles a couple weeks ago, but it was just go out and have an adventure.
And once again, I've done Chattajack on a stand-up paddleboard where I trained very seriously for months, and it took me, I want to say, 6.5 hours or something. There was crazy winds that year. I thought it was going to take me like 4 something. And Coral is going to do it like this. So she's going to prone paddle this sucker.
But I don't have the wind in my face.
You don't have.
It's gonna be in my face.
Yeah, I don't care.
The water,
yeah, there's
change positions.
Yeah, there's
it's all what you're used to.
But,
it's all what you're trained for.
But here's the thing that, you know, when we asked you that question about why you weren't doing triathlon, and this is something that I wish everybody loved, is the most important thing that anybody could do for their fitness is to find something that they enjoy doing. I don't care what it is. You can play field ballet, badminton, I don't care what it is.
Underwater basket.
Basket weave. Wow, you got all the same old jokes as I do. That's great. Whichever one of those sports like tickles your pickle, like go for it.
Totally.
And that's the reason why I think so many people like either get burnt out on sports. Like, you know, I see that happen in stand-up paddle racing too. Is like it becomes this thing, or there's like the ego component of it too, or that maybe people train for races and they get to their race and they achieve it, and then they're like, now what? Is like another thing.
That is absolutely something that I see a lot in the triathlon community. I'm sure paddle sports and other places are the same, but people begin to wear the identity of whatever sport that they're doing consistently, and it's interesting, especially like in long course. I've had so many discussions with very dear friends who are phenomenal athletes, but they've just lost the joy in the process, and they get to race day and they're just like, I don't want to do this. And so to kind of, how do you tease out I'm a person that likes to do this thing versus I am this thing?
Yeah. Or I've even seen people like, they do it so they can post it on their social media feed. Like, it's like they have to buy into that identity. Like, I do these races, and if I don't get the likes, right? It's like almost like they're not even doing it for themselves at that point, which is kind of crazy.
Well, I do think it ends up being you feel compelled to keep doing it because that's where the kudos, the finish line. But that was a really interesting thing that came about last year, right? That you didn't have any finish, and there weren't a whole lot of days or events or organized things to catalyze the momentum. So a lot of the athletes I work with, I'm sure a lot of people that you work with too, found themselves in this space of, now what?
And then what's cool is then I started seeing like this need for community, and maybe for some of these, you know, kind of wellness or fitness experience things. So like what if a couple people just like disrupted triathlon, and let's say they came up with partner ideas where maybe you run a mile and maybe I swim a third a mile, and we go back to a transition area, and then I will then run and then you swim, and then come back and got to paddle around a buoy, maybe prone, and then I got to do it, and then you come back and then you got to do it on stand-up paddling, and then what if you did a second lap? What if your racing or your training became these fun community-based things where it wasn't ultimately about who won or the equipment, but it was about doing something different? What do you think about that?
I'm in. Where do I sign
You're
up?
in. Where do you sign up? Well, we have some fun stuff on that is what we're talking about. So this is one of the concepts we're talking about, because to me, that's what kind of turns me off on triathlon is if this offer's still good, I'll do this at some point. I will do a triathlon on my beach cruiser, my big fat bike, because like I don't want to have to buy all the gear. I don't want to have to wear one of those bike kit things, or like, you know, the triathlon swim shorts. Like, I don't know if that's my vibe. Like, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of gear. So what if it didn't matter and you just ran, swam, and paddled?
I think there's a space for that.
I totally think there's a space for it.
There was a really awesome race down, I mean, right here in our backyard at Madeira, open water swim OWS Leo. We've had the pleasure of meeting
mystical
Leo.
Creature,
Yes. So Leo's been around this area for 20 plus years. He's cultivated this incredible open water swimming community and has been doing a lot of races, but threw in this past weekend a run, swim, run event at the swim race that you did. And that was the biggest division. Yeah, there was what, 50 something people in that? Almost 60 people. And I mean, everywhere from 10 years old all the way up to 89 years old. So it's just people are looking for spaces to do something different, which I think is super cool.
I think that's super exciting. So Chattajack is in October. So tell me a little bit about, you know, your mindset and how you're approaching this big challenge different, and which kind of led to you and I hanging out, because I think that's important for triathletes or for other people just to look at taking that perspective.
Yeah, so in kind of having this Chattajack 2.0 endeavor come about for this year, because my entry rolled into this year, really just wanted to take a super process-based approach. And I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm still pretty new to the world of pro paddling. Yeah. I did it a little bit, you know, maybe 10 years ago, and then got back into it this year. Yeah, hold on. So I was at the Urban Kai paddleboard race, like all of a sudden I hadn't seen Coral. She's like, I'm going to do my first race. I'm going to do it. I'm like, so you're going to do that prone thing? You're like, yeah. She's all excited. You won the freaking race, didn't you? And there was like a couple solid females that I knew from the area that were in that group too. So Coral just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go do this. Anyways, okay. So yes, you're pretty new to it. Well, you know, still
little experience,
the
but
stuff,
yeah.
And you know, like this distance is completely new to me too. Yeah. But it's so fun to just come back at it with a very humble beginner's mindset. Yeah. And I really, like, I'm trying to keep that perspective this whole, I've got like 20 weeks ago. And so finding people that have expertise in the paddle, you know, paddle training. So there's a guy out in Australia, who is writing me a plan, and you know, it's been a great resource, the paddle community itself. And then I knew that I also needed to get my strength and my body integrated so that it could endure for 7 or 8 hours. Yeah. And so that's why I called you up, and I was so stoked that you were on board, not just for the strength aspect, but you know, I've always really, you're kind of like an out of the box kind of thinker when it comes to body stuff and flow and mindset. So yeah, build the team.
I was gonna say, what's funny is people say out of the box all the time, and really I usually refer to myself as a common sense coach because a lot of the things that I preach about are pretty simple and free, but they do cause you to think a little bit differently.
Well, because you got to pull all the pieces together to do some of the movements and whatnot.
Yeah.
So.
There's a lot going on, so I appreciate the respect. I got you there. So, which is a fun challenge to train somebody who's doing something that I've done before, but in a slightly different way, and to take that perspective. But like you said, that mind work and that breath component, combined with getting your body kind of in line, because what I see with like triathletes and with swimmers is nobody freaking warms up. If they warm up, it's a static stretch, or they reach and touch their toes. They do this a couple times. So a static stretch literally tells the muscle to shut down. So you're saying, hey quad, I don't need you to work when you do that little quad stretch. I don't need you to work. Or you reach and touch your toes. Hey hamstrings, I don't need you. Literally, that's the last thing that you need to do. You really want to wake up that system. You want to prime it. And not only do you want to prime your system, you want to prime your breath. You want to prime your intention. You want to have all of those components kind of tied in so that you can maximize that workout. And going back to that, something else that we talked about is the finish race. Like, that's where you get to that's the battlefield. That's where you forget about everything. You trust the process, you trust the plan, and you get to just go be in flow and enjoy being as present as possible. But really where you win is you win every day by enjoying it. And I think you enjoy it when you take that mindset, when you do kind of regulate yourself and play your head movie over and over again. You can picture yourself enjoying it. So there's just such a need for that community to dive into functional strength and core training. And a lot of what we talk about is you gotta have peace. Your body has to be at rest. Okay, if you're stuck in this training sympathetic thing, or if you're one of these people who are working at home, you're stuck at your home, maybe you got your kids, your dog, your husband, whomever. Like, there's just new stressors these days, even if you're working at home. And if you're stressed out and your nervous system's there, and then you're training 10 plus hours a week in triathlon, your body's not really going to recover the way that it needs to recover. So there's just so much room to kind of improve or to focus on what's important.
You kind of get that push-pull.
Yes. There's a little yin and a yang, which has been fun with you to kind of look at your HRV and your sleep and how some of those things. So what's been your big aha since you've been looking at your HRV or your Whoop strap?
Honestly, that I actually I'm sleeping.
Yeah, you're sleeping pretty good.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting because I've been doing a little bit more breath work the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And I've just steadily noticed my respiratory rate at night, and as I've been sleeping better, my respiratory rate is calming down, my HRV is going up, my recovery is going up. And one of the more interesting things, I'm a pretty conservative personality type by nature, and so when I feel like I'm a bit overstressed or overwhelmed, or maybe don't feel quite as recovered, then I'll just kind of shut stuff down.
Yeah, let's rest. That's smart.
Let's rest. But being able to monitor and put some metrics behind recovery. So I've had the performance metrics for ages.
Yeah.
To have metrics behind the recovery has almost given me permission to maybe push a little bit on days that I would typically just.
Well, I was gonna say that's what I've kind of realized a little bit as you and I have been talking about zone 2 stuff, and I've been studying a little bit more in the endurance, is being a coach for nearly 20 years and knowing all about zone 2 and having it blow my mind all over again is hilarious. You're like, I don't get why this is so mind-blowing to you. But like in terms with the Whoop, is my strain scores would be like 11 point something, which is anything above over 10 is a pretty high average, right? It's enough that you're moving towards fitness, but without overly straining yourself. But what I realized a lot of those days is I'm not pushing quite as hard as I need to. And I knew that I was doing too much high intensity stuff, too much weight training. I wasn't recovering the same. But it was like, oh yeah, this craving that I have to move, I can just do this at a lower volume and then I can get more out of it. Just as I'm trying to preach, work smarter, not harder, I've realized that I can do some of my recovery sessions. If I go for a 10-minute little jog and I get my heart rate to about 140, and then I go back and I do like my 15 minutes of my mobility, dance and bear stuff, whatever, then I can just stay in that zone 2. So now I can meet my strain goal or even stretch my strain goal but not put that overall stress on my system. And now what's crazy is my fitness level is raising, my HRV is raising, and I'm able to strain more. So going back to the zone 2 thing, which also blew my mind, and I think that some of your athletes probably need to hear that as well too, is I weighed 210-ish. I couldn't run more than about 90 seconds without having to walk, and my heart rate was like 140 the first time I did it. Like, I was like, this is it? This is crazy. I'd heard them talk about this being frustrating, but this is ridiculous. So then I noticed, like, okay, I could go 3 minutes. I could go 4 minutes. This morning, I ran over the Sand Key Bridge and back, keeping my heart rate under 140. It blew my freaking mind, though. So if you get that gear going right, how much more that allows you to get more mitochondria, you can uptake oxygen, and then once again, then I'm not straining myself because it wasn't about me doing it as fast as I could or how far I could go. I was literally just training my system and allowing my body to recover. And then if I did breath work after that, imagine if I got myself back into a parasympathetic nervous system state so that now I'm recovering all day. And wait for it, if I wanted to go do more later that night, I could do a little bit of a mobility or a movement session that would help me also sleep better and recover so that I could train harder the next day.
Boom. Drop of the knowledge. But I tell you what, that is the hardest. It's so simplistic in a nutshell, but that is the hardest conversation that I have with athletes.
Yeah.
Convincing them to go slow, to build this massive aerobic base so that you can have the capacity. It's about building more capacity without overloading yourself.
Yep.
And then you
But I mean, I look at it, my 2 people that I'm most passionate about working at, it's kind of exactly who you described, Babe. It's either that encouraging those people who maybe didn't have that confidence to start or didn't have that little push. I want them to feel really comfortable. So guess what? If those people start with like zone 2 and fat burning training, it gives their ligaments, their joints, their muscles all time to adapt while you're building up that engine. Because that's what I see people stop, is because they hurt themselves. They go too hard, too fast, they go sore. And then on the flip side of that, these people who are Ironman or competing every single weekend or every other weekend, they need to maybe throttle it back a little bit more. And what's really cool is when people are measuring and going off of their HRV, we're seeing people that are now working out slightly less, or working out less and getting slightly better results. So it's not like they're getting way better results, but let's say if they were one of these 10-hour plus a week triathletes, maybe they're working 8 hours and they're getting better results than they were in that 10 to 12 hour week. That's amazing.
And I'll tell you what, it really comes down to when you're able to find that consistency. So not necessarily working, just blowing the doors off 1 out of every 5 days, but if you're just plugging that, drip effort and recovering well in between sessions, and you can just string all of these days, weeks, and months together, that's going to get you farther down the road.
Oh, 100%.
Scorching yourself, and then you've got this massive recovery.
Well, as I say, I was going to ask you this about like with triathlon too. I feel like a lot of people feel like they've got to do it like all in one session. Like, oh, today is a bike and a run day. I got to do my bricks, and I'm going to do this 90-minute or 2. No. You could actually split it up, and then what I'm seeing is in like, especially in adults like 40 and over, you can benefit a lot from maybe your strain is 10 or less, and then you can come back and you can do another 10 strain. And then overall that might only be like a 14 or 15 strain on your day because you did have that recovery period in between. But your body, your cardiovascular system doesn't really know any different. It's just taking on that load, and then you allow yourself to recover it. So then when you do have that 2-3 hour event, you're ready for it. So it's like, don't be scared to break it up a little bit too.
Don't be scared to rest and recover.
Don't be scared. Stress plus rest equals growth. Okay, I told you you got to ask me a couple of questions. What do you got for me?
All right, Garrett, if you had to describe yourself an animal, what would it be?
Oh, are you taking one?
No.
I answer this question a couple of different ways. So I've been referred to as a dancing bear before. Being a large guy and being from the Chicago land and liking the Chicago sports teams and also being a very outdoorsy guy, I've always kind of, very much gone with the bear thing. And I also, kind of cuddly like a teddy bear to an extent, but it's also like
don't mess with the bear in its cage because I got these fangs, right? So it's kind of like, I'll be cuddly, but respectful. So that's like the bear thing, but really, like, this is the other, and my other friends, they call me a manatee. And I very much am a manatee, right?
You like to sleep?
I like to sleep. I just want to, I want to eat my veggies. I want to float around with my peeps. Like, I don't know, I just identify with that.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I've also said a bear fin because I'm kind of like a bear and a dolphin. So like I'm both things. Like, I don't know. You can make up your own animals in this question. So I think final answer is a bear fin.
Bear fin.
A bear fin. Because I'm very a woodsy, treey guy, but I'm also aquatic.
Like a liger.
A liger, but a bear fin. It's a Garrett creature. Okay. What else you got for me?
Favorite place to paddle in Florida?
Favorite place to paddle in Florida? It's somewhere I haven't paddled. Honestly, like I geek out on going somewhere where I haven't been, right? So right now I'm like really intrigued by like the springs and the nature coast. Like I'll go on these vacations across the country to go hiking and do all this kind of stuff. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I can drive like 90 minutes or less and I can be to these world-class springs that, you know, people thought were the fountain of youth and traveled across the world. So I'm very excited to kind of explore that area next. And the Keys are really hard to do. How about you? Where's your favorite place to paddle?
Man, I actually, there's some freshwater springs up near Melon.
Yeah.
And it's magical.
Sweet, you'll have to tell me some drop-in spots.
I will.
And what's cool is this board meeting, Coral's actually never dropped in right here, which is fun. This is one of those quick, easy access points if you're like us and live in the kind of Clearwater area. It's an easy spot.
That's one of the things I love most about this area is that you can just drive and dock.
All right, what advice would you give to somebody who is a swimmer? So kind of like where I'm at. Like, okay, I had like that I was able to, basically release myself to the water. I stopped fighting the water and I became a drop of water. And that's my big thing is if you're scared of a swim race, I was scared at first. I kind of like I was telling you, my body was, and when I relaxed, I couldn't believe how present I got, how much of a flow state I was in. Literally felt like a drop of water. Then all of a sudden I could begin to feel my technical mistakes. I could be like, oh, this shoulder's hitting. I'm literally rubbing this shoulder and I'm crossing over. I'm hardly using my lats. So once you kind of relax, what's next?
Figure out the next best thing. One technique piece.
One thing at a time.
One thing at a time. It's going to get you farther down the road to being a good swimmer. So.
And that's kind of the same thing like we're working on when you're training. So Coral's training, we're working basically on establishing your back line, which your back line is a lot of times going to be your posture, right? You got to get your lats, abs, and your glutes on the same page. So everybody wants to talk about core or pillar strength. I look at it as can I get you to pull? Even Audrey, hi Audrey. Audrey worked out with us this morning too. Unbelievable athlete. Her head was forward on everything, which is throwing off some of her angles and stuff. So it's like, regardless of who you are, everybody can get stronger in your back line. That's the reason why a lot of people think that that's like, strength's all you need. Well, no, we got to work in multiple planes of motion. So then can you get stronger from your opposite hip to your opposite shoulder? That's what gait is. As much as I want to rip on you guys who just spend all your time in one plane of motion, that's what you're doing. Opposite hip to opposite shoulder. How much time do you spend training that? Building strength, stability in ranges of motion. That's what's really fun about working with you. So you're one thing at a time is getting this together and working that opposite hip to the opposite shoulder. And that's going to be your program for really like 2 or 3 months.
Sweet.
It's just like we were talking about, master those fundamentals, that one thing that you need to do. Maybe it's to build up that aerobic engine with some zone 2, or to just get comfortable in the skills, right? And then after that, you can kind of progress, but you got to enjoy what you're doing as well too. It helps if you've got communities and coaches. It helps if you have some awesome programs to follow, right? So tell us a little bit about your program. So if somebody wanted to join your team, what would happen if they join your team or all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing about Babe is that you can join from anywhere and you can do anything that brings you to being a badass every day. So if you're paddling, cool. If you're triathlon, whatever, that's awesome too. And if you're just doing this, that's great too. But yeah, just hop on the website, teambabeathletics.com, and hop in. It's a virtual community, but also in the Tampa Bay area, we've got a training group coming up for St. Anthony's Triathlon.
Very cool.
Starts in mid-July, 4-week base builder on a rolling monthly basis, and we've got one-to-one coaching and everything in between.
That's awesome. So really whatever you're looking for, if you wanted to get your feet wet, or if you were a female looking for an inspiring, empowering community, you couldn't look for a better place or a better leader, which is awesome. And then if you're one of Coral's people who needs help just getting it together, we're here to help you as well too.
So, you mentioned we had a couple friends come train with you this morning. Tell me about the new initiative opportunity that you've got going on here in Clearwater.
Yeah, as I say, what's kind of funny is I've been a trainer and coach for 20 years, and I've lived in Clearwater for 10 years, but I've commuted to Tampa. I've had some good jobs, I've had some good gigs over there, met wonderful people. But when I first moved here, I moved here to be a barefoot hippie and teach paddleboard lessons and to train people on the beach. So this morning was an amazing full circle thing. And honestly, you helped inspire me to kind of have the confidence to try to move some of my business back here. So for this 6-week series, we're really just taking a theme. It's Monday mornings at 7 a.m. Anybody can come to it. And a lot of times a group class, I charge $25 to $35 a class. We're only charging $10 because I literally want the community in Clearwater to just know that you can come learn and work with a high-level coach. So today was all about dynamic warm-ups, core strength, and introducing to like box breath. Next week will be functional strength training fundamentals. So we'll load up patterns and we'll do a lot more strength stability stuff. Now I talked about building up in ranges of motion and getting that stability at the in range. The smarter, not harder thing. You're not going to tear up your joints, but your nervous system is going to learn how to feel more safe and more integrated. Then at the end of that one, we'll do Wim Hof style breath, and we'll teach people that. So each one of these has a different theme. And then I'm hoping that we built up enough of an audience in this little 6 weeks that we do this is something that we'll continue to do. I know I've seen a couple people say, hey, can we do this at night sometime? We can definitely pop up to that, as well as I've got a whole list of things on my website where we're teaching a breath seminar at Weeden Island this weekend. We've got a beach flow class in Davis Island next week where we do get some of this functional strength training. We mix in the paddle boards and getting out on the paddle boards. We mix in and we bring like Pilates and yoga instructors into it too. So you might see me for a circuit, a badass Pilates circuit, and then go breathe with Keith, or you might go paddle. So we're really mixing it up. As we were talking about disrupting kind of what maybe triathlon or what some of these events and wellness kind of things is, I'm really passionate about finding these things that are fun, outdoors, community, and that get people to just think differently, to try different things a little bit. Because you said what gets excited you to paddle. That's what gets me excited to work out. Going and swimming a mile and doing something that I've never done before, that's exciting to me. And that's how I like just being comfortable doing something different. Well, I think we talked a lot about training. We talked a lot about community. Kind of bragged on ourselves a little bit, how awesome we are. That's cool.
Okay.
That's okay. If you're a badass every day, you gotta talk about it.
Hey.
Let's go paddle.
Go paddle.
Let's go paddle.
Downwinder.
Woo woo! May the wind always be at your back.
And the odds be ever in your favor.
So here's this little island in the schools where we just hung out. Boaters come and hang out. They've even got a grill and picnic tables and stuff out there. But a good little place to catch up on your hydration. And then there's back into the little Pelican home, smelly islands. You can get back out into the intercoastal. The home's back there in Bel Air. You can go by like Hulk Hogan and Tom Cruise's house and stuff. It's pretty rad. Woo!